In this video, we're going to look at how individual firms end up with the supply curve that they have in pure competition. We saw in an earlier video by Ken that firms in pure competition will supply output in line with their desire to maximize profits. And he emphasized that the condition for that, for profit maximization, is where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So in this diagram here, we see that the market determines the price P at the intersection of demand curve D1 and supply curve S1. And if we track this across to the individual firm, which is the left-hand graph, we arrive at the intersection of the marginal revenue curve, which is the straight line here, and the marginal cost curve. And we see that the red dot tells us that at that market price, the firm is a price taker and simply will supply what it can given its cost situation, in this case the quantity QM. Now let us imagine that supply conditions in this market deteriorate, and so the supply curve shifts from S1 to S2, and because of the shortage of supply at P, the price rises from P to P1, which of course will define a new different marginal revenue curve, which is this line here, and a new quantity that's supplied QM1 as defined by this red dot. P1, Q1 is the new supply point for this individual firm. Let's imagine that there's now a rise in price due, let's say, to a shift in demand from D1 to D2. So we now have a new price P2, new marginal revenue curve, new supply point QM2 associated with the intersection of the marginal cost curve and the marginal revenue curve, the new marginal revenue curve. Finally, let's say that supply conditions really deteriorate and the supply curve shifts from S2 to S3. We had an example of this not so long ago when flood conditions in Queensland impacted on all vegetable markets, for instance, and prices started to rise. So now at P3, there's a new marginal revenue curve, which we could label MR3, which is this line here. And at the intersection of the marginal cost and marginal revenue curve, we have a new individual supply of QM3. So our general conclusion now is that as the price rises, so the willingness of this firm to supply rises as well. In other words, the supply curve is this solid red line indicating how much the firm is prepared to supply at different prices. So you can see that it provides a clue as to why the supply curve in the market is upward sloping. Because if you add the supply curve of this firm to every other firm in the industry or in the market, you will come up with S3. So in other words, the market supply is the sum total of the marginal cost curves for individual firms. So the firm's individual supply curve is from this point here upwards. Why this point? Well, we've chosen to start our analysis at the point of intersection of the marginal revenue curve and minimum average variable cost curve. And you'll remember Ken told you that that is the close down point of any firm. If the price were lower than P, firms would not supply. So obviously for prices below P, there is no supply. So the supply curve effectively starts at this point.